I always try to be careful to like really get at the Greek terms and see what they actually mean. There are some instances where I think like the gospel stories have been misreported, so that like even if you look at the Greek, I'm thinking it's probably gotten something wrong. But
Do you
there
have
are
an example?
So the most famous examples of things that probably are in the Gospels but probably just didn't happen, called like an interpolation, so something which is added in later. The most famous examples of these are the ending of Mark's Gospel, and there's a verse in John's Gospel, both of which don't appear in our earliest manuscripts, and so they seem to be a later addition. In fact, once again, sorry, you're doing the hard work here. If you scroll up a little bit, see where see the drop down where it says Bible book list. Yes. You can click on that, and this is the whole Gospel. Right, scroll down on Mark, right the way down to Mark 16. So this is the last chapter of Mark. This is the. I wonder how the ESV says it. So see there, it says the brackets at the in the middle there. It says some of the earliest manuscripts do not include 16:9 to 20. See that? Right here, yeah. It's because the original manuscripts. So our earliest complete manuscripts of the Bible are Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus, and they're like 4th century, and they just end on. They said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. That's where they end. Now, Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus is predicted. So it says, go and you'll see him in Jerusalem and he's going to be there. But all the stuff that happens afterwards, which is like the actual appearances, they're not in there. So it's just widely accepted by most scholars that the rest of the gospel underneath that, the so-called long ending of Mark, is a later interpolation. So that's not like a translation issue from the Greek into English. That's just a thing about the manuscript, which says that something has been added in.
Like Hollywood got involved.
Yeah, there are some scholars who think that the long ending of Mark might have been original, and for some other reason it wasn't in the scripture. Actually, Wes Huff did a video about that a while back. And
what did he say?
Well, it's all a bit dramatic. So there's a guy I know. Oh boy, this is a story. Guy I know called Gnostic Informant on YouTube.
I know him as well.
Yeah, cool, right? So he's on the Danny Jones show, and he says exactly what I've just said about Mark's Gospel. He tells Danny Jones exactly what I've just said. Wes Huff made a response video like on Instagram, and said, so this is partly true but mostly false, and he basically goes into debunk the claim. So the first thing Wes Huff says is like, the resurrection is still narrated. Because, like I just said, it still says, go ahead and he'll be there in Galilee. That is something that Gnostic Informant said on the show. So, like, okay, but Wes is just working off like an Instagram reel, so he doesn't know that. But then Wes says, it is true that our earliest manuscripts don't contain the long ending of Mark, but there's a really interesting feature about them. And maybe you can pull this up, actually, Alessi. If you type in, like, maybe it'll come up if you type in, like, Codex Vaticanus Mark 16. And then type in Mark 16 after it, and maybe just see if there's maybe just click on that, see if there's a scroll down. So okay, pull up this image.
Reddit thread for a minute.
See that image there? So this is a picture of Codex Vaticanus, which again is one of our earliest biblical manuscripts, and this is the ending of Mark, and it ends by saying they said nothing to anyone because they were afraid, and there's nothing else there. The sort of light text that you can see underneath is from the other side of the page, right? So this is a blank document. So Wes Huff, in response to Gnostic Informant, says, but there is an interesting feature. There is an interesting feature of Mark's Gospel, which we only see in Mark's Gospel, which is that in Codex Vaticanus and in Codex Sinaiticus, it does have the short ending of Mark, but there's this big intentional gap that's left at the end of Mark's Gospel. Right? Now, why would they leave a huge gap at the end? Well, because they knew that there was more material. They just didn't include it for whatever reason, but they left this gap so that other scholars could come and correct that decision if they decided they needed to. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Other scholars, though.
Yeah.
Mark
said. So Wes Huff says, look, in Mark's Gospel, can you go back to the other image? So in Mark's Gospel, we've got this big gap at the end, and he says, and this is a feature that's unique to Mark's Gospel. Crucially, we don't see this in any other Gospels. That's what he says in the video. Now, okay, that's a pretty good explanation, right? It's like, okay, yeah, sure, there is a missing long ending of Mark, but because he's left this big intentional gap, we know that he at least knew that it existed. So it wasn't something that was just made up later. It still existed at the time. He just didn't include it in this codex for whatever reason, but he knew it existed because he left the big gap.
But if they, I actually do want to go into this. What I was thinking, maybe I'm overthinking this. But if they leave it blank for other scholars to come in later, you are now letting more time pass and letting people come in who did not necessarily live at the same time as eyewitness.
But check this out, right? So this none of this actually matters because the point that Wes Huff makes, as he says in this video, it does end abruptly and doesn't have the long ending, but it leaves a big gap, which indicates that the author knew there was extra material. And crucially, this is not a feature we see in any other Gospels. Okay. Here's the problem with that. This is Codex Vaticanus. If you were to look at the end of... Actually, let's just look it up. Type in Vaticanus, ending of Luke's Gospel, maybe. Try that. Or just go Codex Vaticanus, just see if there's an online version. Yeah, let's scroll down. Can you just read it online somewhere?
Luke's Gospel?
You kind of need to actually see the actual manuscript itself. So yeah, type in. PDF. You don't want to. Oh yeah, facsimile. That'll do the trick. Let's see here. Yeah, nice. Okay, so let's see if this loads.
Come on.
I'm gonna refresh that. Okay, so this is Codex Vaticanus. Nice. Now, is there like a contents page? Can we get to Luke's Gospel?
You seen anything?
Bookmarks?
No, this is a little bit.
Come on. Because this is all in ancient Greek.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Can we cut?
Yeah, you want to pause for a minute?
I want to find it. I want to show you because this is a really interesting
We'll be right back. All right, we're back. So we were able to find the content.
Yeah. So what I've done is instead of pulling up because Gnostic Informant has made a video about that. It's called like Wes Huff is lying, like they accuse Billy Harson. He's pretty annoyed. I understand why he's angry about this, by the way, and I think you will. I think you will too. But no, but seriously, like I can understand why this was like this is really quite bad. It's got all the information together, so instead of clicking back and forth, we'll just look at the video that they made. But we should play it on mute.
Right. So Wes's video has a copyrighted song in the background, so I can't play it. But we want to make sure we have the context.
If you hit play on mute, just because I want to show you what Wes actually says here when it goes back. So check it out. Earliest copies that leave out the longer ending of Mark have an unusual feature. The copies of these earliest manuscripts leave deliberate blank sections. Pause.
A feature
that we don't... Go back.
All right, go back about 5 seconds.
Read this.
You want me to read it in his voice?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. Yeah. So he's talking here about the versions of the early manuscripts which don't have the long ending of Mark's Gospel. So pop it back.
Okay.
Best Wes Huff impression.
Okay, here we go. The copies of these earliest manuscripts leave deliberate blank sections, a feature we don't find the end of the other Gospels.
So pause.
This is an indication...
Oh yeah, carry on, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
This is an indication that the scribes appear to have been aware of
the material.
It's going to.
So check it out, right? So pay attention to what he said there, which is there's an interesting feature, which is that these earliest versions of Mark, missing the long ending, have an unusual feature. They leave a deliberate gap at the end, something that we don't see at the end of other Gospels. And he shows on screen. See, there's 3 on screen here.
Yes.
It's Codex Vaticanus, Codex Sinaiticus, and Codex Alexandrinus, I think is how you would say it. Three versions, and as you can see, he's highlighted in a big yellow box the gap where the long ending would go. Okay, so we all clear on what the argument is here. This is probably about to semi blow your mind, but check this out. Okay, so hit play.
Try me.
So it cuts now to Gnostic Informant, who's basically saying, this is a Billy Carson level bull crap lie. So he's saying that they're aware of extra material. Check this out, ladies and gentlemen. Buckle your seatbelts. It's about to get wacky.
Evidence exists, he says. That was a Billy Carson level
bull crap lie.
And it's funny. The funny part about it is he's talking about the Codex Sinaiticus right now.
And you can do this
according to the Sinai Bible.
Okay, so you can mute this again.
Do you mind if I ask a clarifying question?
You can mute this now. Just skip forward with the arrows. So check this out. Keep going. One more time. Right, so check this out, right? So, as we established, he thinks that there's a gap at the end of the Mark and Codex Sinaiticus, for example, because they knew that there was extra materials. And crucially, this is something that we do not see at the end of other Gospels. Go back 1 arrow and hit play.
Opinion that I disagree with. This is an objective statement
check it out.
That you can go and
Codex
check
Sinaiticus,
for yourself.
Book of Acts.
Here on the screen right now,
There's
here
a gap.
is the Codex Sinaiticus of the Acts,
Check it out. Luke's Gospel, Matthew's Gospel, Mark's Gospel, John's Gospel.
Revelation. All
Pause
the
on,
endings
go
you
back
just
and pause
saw,
on John.
All of them have a
There's a lot going on here.
You can put it on mute. Put it on mute, but go back.
This one right here?
No, as in the video. Just go back an arrow or two, but mute the video.
Okay.
And hit play, and then so you can see that's the book of Acts. That's the book of Luke. Pause around about now. Play a tiny bit more. Pause now.
Right there.
Oh my god, it's so fast. All right.
Yeah, that's because he's sort of lining it up to what he said. So, ready
Oh, he was timing it,
now. There you go. So check this out, right? So he's showing in Codex Sinaiticus, which remember what has just been said, right? Wes Huff has said that, well, the interesting thing about Mark's Gospel is where they have the short ending, they leave an intentional gap because they know there's extra material. At the end of Acts, Luke, Revelation, John, look at John here, same Codex, Codex Sinaiticus. Look at that massive gap. So hold on a second. What does Wes mean when he says this is not a feature we see at the end of other Gospels? Are there supposed to be a bunch of missing material from John's Gospel and Luke's Gospel too? I don't think so. So Wes has obviously made a mistake including Codex Sinaiticus, right? Because they all leave a gap at the end. It's probably, is it that there's extra material, or is it just that they've got to the end of the book and want to start on a new page? Is that a better explanation? So, okay, so he's messed up the Codex Sinaiticus, but he showed 3 on screen, right? So keep playing, again on mute. So the other one was Codex Vaticanus. So this is the end of, you can skip forward a tiny little bit. Codex Vaticanus, there you go.
Right there.
Same thing, Corinthians, Acts, Revelation, John's Gospel, all of them, once again, have gaps at the end of them. So Wes Huff has said that the only reason why Mark's Gospel has a gap at the end of it is because they knew the long ending existed. But all of the Gospels in that same codex have gaps at the end of it.
So you think it's cherry picking, obviously.
It's not just cherry picking, it's just like getting it flatly wrong. It's
Yeah.
saying that, well, we know that they knew of the existence of the long ending of Mark because the scribes left a gap to include that long ending of Mark. And this is a feature. Remember he said this is a feature that we don't see at the end of any other Gospels. You can look up these codexes online and read them. It's like he just didn't even check. Like there's a gap at the end of every single Gospel. Pretty bad, right?
I agree, and I think.
But you know what? It's about to get worse.
Before you say how it's going to get worse,
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is an unfortunate part of the internet that Wes is going to fall victim to and other guys fall victim to when you're in this response era where you're constantly having to respond because you can't have one thing wrong about your belief system because it could threaten the
Thing
whole
is,
dominoes.
As Wes said on your show, sat in this self-same chair that I'm in right now, what is Wes Huff's PhD in? Do you remember? Paratextual features of New Testament manuscripts.
I don't even remember.
Paratextual features. Paratextual features of New Testament manuscripts, meaning like features of New Testament Greek manuscripts that are paratextual. So not about the content of the text, but stuff to do with the way that the manuscripts are written. You know, like the handwriting, the layout, this kind of stuff. So in other words, this kind of stuff. Like this is squarely within his expertise.
Yes.
Paratextual features of New Testament documents. And yet he's managed to make a genuinely, to me, unfathomable blunder. I do not understand how you can make a video where you say that there's a gap at the end of Mark's Gospel in Codex Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, and that's something we don't see in any of the other Gospels. If you have copies of those codexes and you can look and see that there are gaps at the end of every single one of them, I do not understand how you make that blunder. I genuinely don't get it.
Yeah, it seems like a big mistake.
But it's about to get worse.
How?
I'll show you how. Maybe try going forward a little bit, because I'm not sure if they show it on screen again. So pause, check it out. So this is Wes's video. Also, like, take note of the comments here, right? Like
Yes,
this is just
Gnostic
another
informant comment.
this is just another feeble and weak attempt to make the Bible seem like it's a tool tale. So people are coming after Gnostic Informant for this. I don't know how many views this had, but you can see it's got nearly 4,000 likes, 4,200 or 700 likes. So it must have a fair amount of views. Everyone's coming after Gnostic Informant. In the video, as you can see, Wes has shown 3 manuscripts which have the gap, and the gap is supposed to indicate that although there's a short ending, we know that there was a longer ending too. I hope you're strapped in, ladies and gentlemen, because check this out, right? So Wes has shown these on screen and helpfully added a yellow box around the gap. The bottom 2, Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus. Yeah, they have the short ending and a gap, but so do the rest of the Gospels. The one on the top there, Codex Alexandrinus, or Alexandrinus, is from the 5th century, and look at me when I say this, has the long ending of Mark. That codex has the long ending. The photo that is on screen right now at the top there is the long ending of Mark with a gap after it. So Wes Huff has said that yes, the earliest manuscripts only have the short ending of Mark, but they've left a gap to indicate they knew there was a long ending of Mark. He has shown on screen a manuscript with the long ending of Mark and then highlighted a gap after the long ending of Mark in order to prove that there are only gaps when they know that there is a missing long ending of Mark.
Doesn't make sense.
Not only that, but even on the ones that do have the short ending of Mark, where he said, okay, well, there's a gap after those, there's also a gap after every single other gospel in those codexes. I don't know what to say.
Has he addressed this?
No. As far as I know, he deleted the video because Gnostic Informant is obviously pretty annoyed about this, and it's just like down the memory hole. No correction, no apology to Gnostic Informant as far as I'm aware. This just disappeared. And so obviously
there should be.
Gnostic
in all
Informant
honesty,
still has the video, right? And so he can show it like this. And as you can see in this video, Wes Huff is lying. This is on MythVision's channel if you want to go and watch the whole conversation. The thing is, this is like buried within a 2-hour podcast, so not a lot of people saw that this happened. And like, you can see now when Gnostic Informant is there saying like, this is a Billy Carson level bullcrap lie. It's like, yeah. And I can understand why he's so annoyed, because all of these thousands of people are coming after Gnostic Informant saying, oh, yeah, see, they never know what they're talking about. This Gnostic Informant guy, oh, he doesn't know that, yeah, sure, there's, because there's a, okay, there's a long ending, but they left a gap, you fool. You didn't know that in paratextual, like Greek, if you do paratextual manuscript tradition, like you'll know that they leave gaps when there's extra material. And they're all coming after Gnostic Informant. And Wes has just made like an unfathomable blunder. Now, like you say, it is really important to point out that people just make mistakes all the time. I've probably made about 15 mistakes during this video. I've said the wrong date, I've said the wrong thing, I've quoted the wrong thing, I've mispronounced Alexandrinus or Alexandrinus. Fine, yeah, you can do that, you can make mistakes like that. But this, firstly, I don't understand how it happened. I just don't get how you do this, especially if you're making a graphic. There's a yellow box. Maybe he doesn't make his own graphics, but like there is a yellow box. There is a yellow box highlighting a gap after the long ending of Mark. I'm hoping that people listening are following what I'm saying here and understand that this is like this is like I kind of couldn't believe it when I first saw it. But yeah, I mean, and by the way, also there may be some explanation for this. Like maybe I'm like massively misreading something, and so is Gnostic Informant. Like maybe, I don't know. Like I don't want to say with too much confidence that like this is.
It seems like it's a very clear mistake.
It's just like it's such a big mistake, especially if your PhD is in paratextual features of New Testament manuscripts. I don't understand how this happens. And the worst part for me is that all of these comments are coming after Gnostic Informant. And now it means that because this video just doesn't exist anymore, because Wes Huff took it down.
That's the shitty part about the internet.
Wes Huff took it down that like if someone sees Gnostic Informant, they might be like, oh, I saw that guy. Oh, I saw that guy. Yeah, there's that video that Wes Huff like destroyed this guy, and that's why he's looking at the Billy Carson thing and going like, yeah, that's like a bad look for Billy Carson. But if somebody had pulled this, if Wes Huff had done this in a debate, in like a Billy Carson type situation, imagine if we were on this podcast right now, Wes Huff is there and he's made this exact argument, and I said to him, well, take a look at the other Gospels. They've all got gaps after them too. Also, the one that you've just shown includes the long ending of Mark. That would be a Billy Carson moment for him. Yeah, it really would. And so I can understand why Gnostic Informant is so annoyed. Anyway, I don't so much like to sort of stir the pot here, but I sort of said I was making a response to Wes Huff, and it all kind of kicked off, and people were commenting, and I was going to make a response video. And I did part 1, which was about the Isaiah scroll, and I was going to do part 2, where I was going to talk about all of this. And I spoke to Gnostic Informant, and I was like, look, man, I think this needs to come to light, because I think it's not fair that this happened to you, and nobody like knows. But it's been so long now that I felt like if I came out and made a video just pulling this up, it would have just seemed like out of nowhere. It would have seemed like I was just taking a jab for the sake of it. And so I kind of haven't, but I'm kind of glad we've had the opportunity to talk about it now, because I really want people to be aware that this happened. But I kind of don't want to just like randomly take a jab.
I understand what you're saying.
I'm glad you asked, because we were talking about the long ending of Mark, and I said some people deny it, including Wes Huff, and you said, well, what does Wes Huff say about it? Which is why I'm now talking about it. But like, I I just think it would be, like I say, I don't know how many views this actually got, but as far as I know, there was no correction or anything. And the fact that he took it down shows that he knows that something went wrong there.
I haven't had a chance to talk with Wes about it. Obviously, I come at my worldview differently than Wes does. You know, I'm very open on a lot of this stuff, and certainly don't have the religious beliefs he does. But some of the things that he discusses are fascinating. He's been a good guy with me. But I'm in a position now where he was on here saying things, and obviously there's things that have been translated to the internet where he's backed up with some of these things, and one of these things to me, unless I'm really missing something here, looks provably wrong. And I don't want to get into like this thing where I suddenly start criticizing a guy who's on my show. I do want to talk to Wes when I get off camera about this. However, there are a few things that are true right here. It's a very bad look that Wes blocked Gnostic Informant on Twitter.
I don't know. Did he block him?
He did. I saw that the other day.
Okay. I don't know about that.
I don't believe in. I don't block anybody. Mm-hmm. All right. I think before I was ever in public or whatever, there were I blocked Skip Bayless, who doesn't know me. You don't know who that is. Good for you.
I've never blocked anyone either.
Right. I've never blocked a detractor or someone commenting against me or something like that. I've certainly never blocked someone who's got an audience who's speaking out against something I do or anything like that. So I full stop really don't believe in that. I think you have to let speech out there. So that I have an issue with. Secondly, if you are going to take the video down, that is a quiet admission of I fucked up. And if in that process someone else's reputation was hurt by your fuck up and they were correct, I do believe you are obligated as a decent person to correct that record. And I know Neil's going to come on here at some point.
That's Gnostic Informant.
He and I have talked about that.
Ask him about this, man.
I was out of the loop on this stuff. I don't get involved in the
bear
drama.
in mind, because that's the thing. It seems kind of drama, and part of me is like, oh, this is kind of interesting and juicy and that kind of thing. But I like to stay away from that. But I do think it's important to know this. But also bear in mind that I might have misremembered a feature here. As far as I know, it's possible that Wes has addressed it, or that he said he took it down for a different reason, or something like that. But I spoke to Gnostic Informant, and as far as I know, the video was deleted, and there was no correction or apology. I might have got some of those details wrong. What I've definitely not got wrong is the content here. That claim was made, and it was wrong, and it was provably wrong in his area of expertise, which I don't know, man. I don't really know what to make of it, because.
Have you ever talked with Wes?
No, I'd love to. It's funny, when I made my video, people in the comments who said, well, if you're so sure, why don't you just debate him? And I was like, if you watch the video to the end, I said that of course I would talk to him. He's like the new messiah of the Christian movement. Of course I talk to him. It'd be like a huge thing. Everybody wants to talk to him. But he's made a video where he said, I'm probably not going to debate you.
Yes,
where he's just saying,
I've seen it.
and I totally understand that, man. You get invitations up the woo-ha. It's crazy when something like that happens to you. But the thing is, half of the comments were saying, oh, why don't you just debate him if you're so scared? And then half of the comments were saying, "Oh, you're just trying to debate him into it. You're just trying to bait him into a debate for clout." So it's I'm either too scared to debate him, or I'm trying to bait him into a debate.
I'll shut that down right now.
No, but for clarity, of course I would love to speak to Wes Huff, but I kind of want people to stop coming after me, pestering me to do it, because the invitation is open. But I also don't want people to go and pester him to do it, because he's incredibly busy. He's got a family. He's got stuff going on. People don't understand. He's a real human being, and also he's just the other reason I was hesitant about this is because he strikes me as just a really nice guy. He just seems
he's a very nice guy.
Seems very friendly, really nice. Really excited, and also, by the way, putting biblical scholarship on the map. He goes on Joe Rogan and starts talking about P52 and the manuscript traditions surrounding John's Gospel and stuff. That is amazing.
It's amazing.
That is so cool, and I'm so excited that that's happening. But the annoying thing is that because he was so popular. Actually, I'm interested. Can we scroll down and look at the comments on this video while we're talking? Is that when I made my video about Wes Huff, I was actually stunned. Yeah, check it out. So invite Wes Huff on. Tell me you're being paid by Billy without telling me. Did Carson pay you for this hit piece? This dishonest as usual from the very start. You misrepresent how Wes responded to and it's kind of I can't even waste my time to watch this. Mythvision has so much bias against Christianity, jealousy at work here. And when I first started seeing this come through, I genuinely was are these just bots? I don't think they are bots, by the way.
Some of them are, but I don't think they're bots. A lot of them are not.
When I made my video about Wes Huff, I was stunned. by the amount of like they'll still be there now, like comments, just comments and comments and comments, and it was
Don't
all
read
the same
the comments
stuff.
on this
By the
video.
way, none of it was about the content. This was the thing that was suspicious.
Yeah.
It was all like, you're jealous of Wes Huff's success, whatever. You're trying to bait him into a debate. You're just upset you didn't go on Joe Rogan or whatever. So, this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But there was such an influx of them that I was like, what is going on? And I saw the same thing happen to Myth Vision. I saw the same thing happen to, I think, Cameron Bertuzzi when he made a video. He's a Catholic. He makes a video about Wes Huff, and the same thing happened. So I was like, whoa, I was genuinely like stunned by it. And so, although I don't like pointing stuff like this out just for the sake of it, there is something kind of gratifying about it. But one doesn't like it, because it essentially feels like gossip. But when you have dealt with months and months of people commenting, being like, well, you're just an idiot, and Wes Huff is a biblical scholar, and you're just a YouTuber guy, it's kind of like, come on, people. Like, let's cut the crap and like actually talk about the content here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. And then, so if that's what's happening to me, and that's what's happening to Myth Vision, can you imagine what Billy Carson is going through right now?
Yeah. Now, Billy is a little bit of a separate subject for me personally, because he gives it as much as way more than he takes.
To be clear, like Billy Carson was just talking a lot of nonsense.
Yes,
like
he's out of his mind.
Like he seems to sort of. I know he's got the whole aliens thing going on or whatever. I've never like listened to him before, but I listened to some of him on like Flagrant and a little bit of the debate he had with Wes Huff just because it was like a big deal. And
there's not enough weed in Narnia.
I'm hearing him say things that are just false, and Wes Huff has done a great job of bringing some of that out. So he's like confusing, like he says like the Sinai Bible, and was confusing it with the Gospel of Barnabas.
Yeah.
And the Sinai Bible is Codex Sinaiticus, the 4th century manuscript of the Bible, and the Gospel of Barnabas is like this apocryphal, like Middle Age. And that makes a huge difference, right? So yeah. So to be clear, I wouldn't defend Billy Carson's claims, but even if you like mess up like that, I'm thinking like, I just can't imagine what it must be like, the comments he's receiving and stuff. But anything about the Wes Huff stuff for some reason just got this huge response. And so I can understand why Gnostic Informant is looking at Wes Huff, like, especially as he gets really popular after the Rogan thing and everything, and everyone's saying like, this guy is like such a knowledgeable, brilliant scholar, and Gnostic Informant is like, this guy screwed me over. Yeah, I can really see why he's so annoyed.
He has
about
a point. And I obviously, like, he was already coming in here. I was less familiar with some of the details in this because, and I'm going to talk about him, and I want to address some of these points you're making. You're making a lot of really important points here. The internet drama that happens with cults that form comment cults, I stay the fuck out of it,
it's
right?
great, but I'd never seen it.
I've seen a bunch of that, and I know Neil was like said Gnostic Informant was sending me a bunch of stuff, and I was like, I don't want to know. Like, I know he's coming on the show later, so whatever he wants to say, he'll say, I like things being handled in here. Yeah. I understand that, whether I like that or not, sometimes I don't have control over that.
But look, man, I have been on the wrong end of vegans. I've been on the wrong end of Muslims.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Muslims. I've been on the wrong end. Maybe that could be a bit euphemistic.
I've never met a vegan who's a happy person.
Okay, I was vegan for like 4 years.
Yeah, were you happy?
Next question.
I'm a fucking meathead.
Yeah,
so.
but my control variable.
Your control variable
might have been a very unhappy meat eating Alex at the same time. But besides the point, I have been on the wrong end of all of these people. I have never seen anything like what happened when I made my video about Wes Huff, and I mean it. I mean, when I pissed off the Muslims, and they were coming after me in the comment section, it didn't even come close to compare. Oh yeah. Not harder to, obviously they're not like saying I'm going to come to your house and kill you, right? Like they weren't doing that. But I mean, sorry, I don't mean to don't misunderstand me here. What I mean is like the level and consistency and amount, like the traffic. I genuinely just couldn't believe it. That's why I was first looking at this, like, is this like bots or something? Because like they were because firstly, none of them were about the content. All of them were identical. You could copy and paste them from my video to
some of it is
Captain
bots.
Christianity. But like, I don't think it is, just to be clear. That's not the accusation I'm making. But it was so stunning to me that I was just like, I just don't understand what's happened here. So I had to make this really long technical video about the book, the Great Isaiah Scrolls and the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I think essentially vindicated most of the stuff that I was saying. I never did my part 2 video responding to Wes Huff, which was going to be about Jesus claiming to be God.
Because of the comment section?
No, not because of that. Just because I got kind of busy. And then one of the big sections that I was going to respond to was about whether Jesus claimed to be God. And I just recently had a debate about this. So I was preparing for the debate. And I kind of didn't want to like use all my arguments in a video and then go and debate because it was better to just save it for the debate. And so and also I was just like extremely busy. And so I just never ended up making it. And I still might, like, I still kind of want to do this part 2 Wes Huff, video.
I would much rather, and I want to see that, to be clear.
But I just didn't want it to seem like it was really coming out of nowhere.
I know. I want to see you two have a conversation and go about it.
I think that on most, like, I mean, because Wes's PhD, as I say, is on like New Testament manuscripts. So when it comes to things like the manuscript tradition and stuff, I think Wes Huff could like crush me. Not that I'd have much to debate him on. I'd query some of his, like, I think some of his datings are like definitely against scholarly consensus, but also possibly like I think I'd want to like criticize them, but I would fully anticipate him coming up with some kind of argument or something where I'd go, oh cool, yeah, I'd never heard of that, interesting, because that's his field, and he would like crush me if it were a debate like that. I think there's a world in which we try to have some kind of debate where like it looks really badly for me, and I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, you're so right in ways I didn't know. That I could totally see that happening. I mean, I would much rather just have a conversation with the guy. But again, I don't do the like call out thing. I'm not like, Wes Huff, like come and
yes.
It's like, look, man, like obviously he knows that if he wants to like come on my podcast, he can come on my show.
It
like,
doesn't need to be like that though either.
And also him not doing so is no indication of anything. He's just busy, man.
This is the problem with the internet. We are literally talking about like a religious conversation here too, where it's like a fucking 90s rap beef. Like, oh yeah, you got to call him out on the song and then drop, Jay-Z drops this, like Nas drop Ether. It should not be like that. That's ridiculous. There's two things that I think really got to get addressed here that are based on some of the things you've been sharing on this. And I appreciate you giving all the context too for everyone. And also, by the way, anyone who's like claiming someone like you would be clout chasing, I mean, I think last I checked, you have like 3 times the subs. Right. So that's bullshit. And you've been around a lot longer.
Right.
Number 1. Wes's video about I won't debate you. I'm not going to say some of the stuff that I discussed with Wes offline about that because that's a personal conversation, but I will tell you some of my thoughts on that I also I said to him at least. But Wes, I think because he also blew up so fast over something that is so important to him and so many people, which is the meaning of life, like the religion, he is extremely afraid to get things wrong and let people down in that way, and like maybe be the put out something that could be pulled as a string to say the whole house of cards doesn't exist with relation to Christianity, which unfortunately, if you're going to hold yourself to that standard, I don't even think Jesus had that standard. So I was like, you don't need to feel that way. Secondly, I'm like, dude, like if you listen to his podcast with Joe that he did in January, Joe even said it at one point when he was referring to Billy, where he's like, if you woke me up in the middle of the night and asked me about MMA or something to debate, he's like, I have enough that I could be like, wait, oh yeah. And I could go right into it. So when Wes says, I would need at least 6 months to prepare, no, the fuck you don't. You're not, it's a live debate. It's communication. It's not scripted. You're going to go back and forth. You will get some things wrong. You will hope to get more things right. If you know your shit, it's going to go down correctly. So I thought that was a bad argument, but there's also some stuff like, as you said, and I appreciate you saying that, like he's got some life stuff going on too. And a lot was being thrown at him all at once. Everyone wanted to debate him, including some people, not you, who were unheard of, who were just trying to clout chase to debate him for sure. So there was a lot going on there, but that also comes down to what has formed here, which you've talked about a lot, which is like the cult around this stuff. And it's so fascinating to me because some of it is bots, but to your point, a lot of it is not. And I always talk about the concept, the universal law of physics. For every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction. It explains everything in the world. I'm a firm believer in equilibrium, in literally everything. It's like my curse in life. I see both sides. I understand why it lands here. But the violence of a reaction here to an action here is far lesser than the violence of a reaction here to an action here, right? And for people listening, not watching, I widen my hands with these 2 fists. And so when you see that over time, and it literally gets to the meaning that people have on this earth, which in this case they may define in their religion. You use the word yourself about Wes being this new Messiah or whatever. There are people who view him that way. And they're like, oh my God, we finally have a dude who can shadow box with people on the language and the text and the actual history and the ancient, the Graham Hancock version of like
And
Christianity.
it's not just that, it's the fact that through whatever fortuitous circumstances, he's ended up on the biggest platform in the world of Joe Rogan. So even if people don't think that he's like the guy they would have chosen or whatever, it's like, well, he's now the guy. Like, he's on Rogan. Like, we need him to do well. We want him to do well. And everyone's very excited about it. And we hope that he does well, and that's cool. That's great, But like, there's so much to say. I mean, about like the debate thing. Like, debates are also, I have a sort of on and off relationship with debates, and I don't know if I would be interested in debating Wes Huff. Like, if it was set up, like, yeah, sure. I mean, that'd be a big thing. But I'd much rather just talk to him, because the thing that gets lost is
I see.
There's so much that's so interesting to talk about. Like, and when he says I'd have to prepare for a really long time. And you rightly say, well, if it's your area of expertise, as Rogan says, it's the first thing he says in their interview. Like, if you woke me up in the middle of the night, I'd be able to talk about this. It's like, yeah, you could talk about it. But if you're doing a debate, it's kind of a different story. Also because, like, if I had a debate with Wes Huff, we might talk about the reliability of the Gospels or the nature of Jesus. That's my wheelhouse. But we might also get into talking about manuscript traditions. That's his wheelhouse. So I would have to prepare, because the conversation will go into areas that are not my expertise. And if it were a conversation, I could go, oh, okay, so tell me about this. I'm interested in this because you know about this. Can I ask you some questions? Whereas in a debate, it has to be, here's my rebuttal. Right. And so
you're going official.
So
I see what you're saying.
For a debate, you kind of do have to prepare in that way.
But not 6 months.
Depends on the nature of the debate.
That's what I'm saying. Like, when you
is
universally say 6 months for anyone. Yeah. And we also know, and like, his logic was, he said this part publicly, well, I had 24 hours for Billy because that was Billy. And like, to an extent, I get it. Because he's not even a moving target. But, you could probably talk to someone in a week if you had to. Maybe you're not going to be perfectly as scholarly as sharp, but like, if you're gonna, and this is just my opinion with anyone, whether it be Wes, whether it be you, if you're going to be an expert in a certain space and go and put your opinions out there, if you can't take the heat, don't come in the kitchen.
I think I agree to some degree, but I also do think that there are people who like producing educational content but aren't debaters. I don't think Wes Huff considers himself like a debater. That's not who he is. He's like an educator, and he likes making informational videos and stuff. There's a kind of temperament that you need to have to debate. Like, there are people who are awful at debating but are incredibly good communicators. And I understand if someone says, look, that's just not how I roll. That's not what I do. Even if, but the thing is, there are ways around it. Like, firstly, you have a conversation or a podcast. But I understand that, say Wes Huff saw this and said, okay, I want to speak to Alex. Even if we say, oh, it's just a conversation, he can't prevent me from like coming in with like a debate energy and like acting as if it's a debate and kind of trying to trap him in that way. So he's got to be ready for that, which means he'd have to prepare. I wouldn't do that, or I'd try not to do that, of course, but he doesn't know that, and I understand that he can't trust that with any conversation that he has. But there are other ways around it. Like, you can do a series of response videos. You can do, people have done, they don't get as many views, but they're quite effective. I saw Cameron Batuzzi did this a while back, where a debate, he's a Catholic YouTuber, Capturing Christianity. Yeah. People in debates, they do opening statement, then the rebuttal, then a Q&A or whatever. They did this, but each of those segments was a video. So they put out the opening statement, 20-minute video, and then the other person can watch it, can take their time, take as long as they like, and put out their opening statement. Then for the rebuttal, this person, so it's formatted, there's a set format, but in between every speech, you get to stop, think, go, research, and it's just such a brilliant way of doing a debate, because what you're seeing is two people who you've chosen because you think they're good at what they do, but giving them the time and space to actually think and respond to everything. It's not like, oh, can you remember this on the spot? Oh, you're going to, because people make fun of this. Like, in a debate, they'll be like, if someone like starts typing on their computer, they'll be like, oh, he's Googling the answers because he doesn't know, oh, look, he's fried, It's like, okay, but that's only interesting on like a gossip level. Like, if you actually want to know what the most interesting answer he could come up with is, which is ostensibly why you're here, then give him a month to think about it, And so there are ways around the sort of, I don't want to debate, I need to prepare kind of thing. I like that as an idea, right? So there's loads of stuff that you could do.
By the way, you're also talking, like, you're referring, this should be stated, you're referring to like the official like word debate and what that means from like the old school debating format. When I'm being a little more liberal with my use of debate.
So just like getting two people in a room.
Yeah, like get them in this fucking podcast studio
yeah.
and talk. You know what? Like we're not going to sit here and be
Yeah.
like, and the first subject
Yeah.
is going to be that. It's more
Yeah.
just live.
But also,
But
I
see what
understand
you're
that Wes is like hot property. At least he has been. I don't know how. I know after the Rogan thing, it was like stratospheric. I don't know if that's still going at the same rate. I don't know if it's going to sort of tailor out or whatever. But there's a sense in which it's sort of like know your worth. Like don't go and like debate anybody or this person or that guy, especially if you feel like you don't have time to prepare and it will be a bad look for you for that reason. Like do your thing, man. Like you are experiencing this unimaginable experience that people dream of. It's like enjoy it, man. Take the time, like make it content that's interesting to you. Use it for projects that you care about. He's got his Apologetics Canada thing. I think it's like an organization. He puts on events. Yeah, put all of your effort into leveraging what you're doing to make that a success. Like it makes so much more sense. Like I totally understand it. And for what it's worth, I have spoken to Wes, over message or whatever. It's not like he's like ignoring me or whatever. Like
That's good.
I know that he's just like a guy with a lot going on and seems like a nice dude, all this kind of stuff.
It's a very nice
cool.
guy.
It's why I don't, I like, but I don't like doing all of this kind of stuff. And I hope if he sees this and is watching, he knows that like, he understands why I think it's important to point this out.
Yeah, he'll see. I'm
But at
going
the
to
same
send it to him.
time, same time, like, I'm not just trying to take a stab in the dark here, right? But yeah, I mean, of course, the invitation remains open for him to come on my show, but also like, that's my show, that's my thing. He doesn't have a show, but like, maybe one day it will happen, and it might take a year or two or more for it to calm down or whatever, or maybe it will never happen. I don't know, but
Yeah,
but
I would just,
whatever, man. Like, okay, we'll see what happens.
I would love to see an open discussion of the idea that religion has to be perfect. Is this expectation we've put on things? Because I do feel like that's a part of it. People feel like if they admit that one thing may not hold water to evidence, that means the whole thing's not true. And to me, it's ironic. We open up this conversation talking about like the perfect timing or whatever you want to say about how the universe is even
the multiverse,
world is even able to exist. Yet the great paradox to that is that things are also so beautifully imperfect. That's what defines humanity, at least in how I see it. And I don't see why that can't be the case with religion, even with a deified figure like Jesus Christ. We already pointed out that the Gospels that project him to be perfect also show things where he's not necessarily perfect, which I like. I think that's cool, but there's this idea that, you can't talk about this because that would be blasphemy or whatever. Well, that's a non-starter. And I'm very careful because you pointed out, like when it comes to specific people, even maybe like a Wes or something like that, the comments will get weird. But when you start to talk about people's beliefs, they get real defensive about it. And I get that. So I try to do it as respectfully as I can. My own producer, Alessi, is like an enormous Christian. He's got the chain out right now. Like the dude, Lawrence Krauss walked in here who believes something came from nothing. The dude's wearing a cross shirt. I'm like, maybe not the day for that, but whatever. It's cool. That's fine. So we have great discussions about this. Obviously, we come at it from a different lens. So I know it's possible to do that.
Yeah.
But for some reason, so many people are unwilling to do that, and I think it kind of defeats the purpose of like what someone like Jesus is supposed to stand for, which is like one of the things I would say is like listening to other people and understanding where they come from.
Jesus did have debates of a kind. It's kind of interesting watching his sort of confrontations with the Pharisees and the like. But the thing that does get lost is how interesting it all is.
Yeah.
So like on Wes's Rogan episode, he talks briefly about some of the like Gnostic Gospels and why they're not part of the canon, and talks about the motivation for not including them, and says that they seem to be like theologically motivated. I would love to talk to him about his idea about the theological motivations of the Gnostic Gospels versus the canonical Gospels. If that were a debate, I mean, in my video, he says like, well, part of the problem as to why these Gnostic Gospels aren't included is because I might be misquoting him here, but he says something like because they seem to have like theological motivations. They seem to have been written with like an apologetical purpose. And I'm like, well, so do the canonical Gospels. People think that about the canonical Gospels as well. And a lot of people were like, well, you cut out the reason that he gave because he was specifically talking about, their uncomfortability with like the tomb story or whatever. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but like I've got interesting things to say on that, but I don't want to do it on the format of like, well, Wes says this, But I say to you, I want it to be like, well, hey man, what do you think about this? There's some really interesting like apologetical motives within the Gospels, even on the tomb itself. So like Wes is talking about how one of these apocryphal texts has people like camped outside the tomb because like it's really important to them to show that like the tomb was being watched, that the body couldn't have been stolen or something. Like it was really, and this is part of the motivation. Yeah, I might be sort of misquoting or paraphrasing or whatever that, but there's some interesting stuff about the tomb in the New Testament. Like this is so interesting. One of the most important apologetical arguments for the resurrection of Jesus is the fact that the tomb was found empty. Right, Jesus is laid in a tomb by Joseph of Arimathea, and then there's an empty tomb. The disciples go to the tomb and it's empty. Now, this is, again, we're having a conversation, so this works. This isn't like some definitive proof of anything, but it's interesting that if you look at how the tomb is described in the Gospels, in Mark's Gospel, it's a tomb. In Matthew's Gospel, which is the next latest, it's a new tomb. Why is it a new tomb? Oh, because one of the most important observations of the Gospels is that the tomb was empty. But you could bury multiple bodies in a tomb. And so how do you know that Jesus had actually gone? What if he got mistaken for a different body? What if he got lost? What if there were loads of it? The important thing is that the tomb was empty, so we know that there was a body in there that's not there anymore. So Matthew's Gospel says it's a new tomb, because if it's new, no one else had been laid in it before. By the time you get to Luke's Gospel, it's described as a tomb in which no one had been laid. It's specified that no one had been laid in the tomb. And John's Gospel goes to the double whammy. It says, laid in a new tomb in which no one had been laid. So there's this like subtle indication, like is there like this increasing emphasis on the emptiness of the tomb? And so they really wanted to, and maybe the tomb actually was a new tomb in which no one had been laid, but they just felt like it was more important to emphasize that. Or maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe it just happens to be the way that they're describing the tomb. But there's stuff like that, which if you read through the Gospels, there is absolutely no way you would notice that. There's no way you would notice that unless you have a specific question in mind. You go back to the Gospels and you read through them with that question in mind, which is what biblical scholars do, which is why even now, after thousands of years, people are still discovering things about the Gospels. Like something like that. You can imagine thousands of years, no one's noticed that sort of developmental description of the tomb. And then finally someone's like, this is kind of interesting. That kind of stuff is still happening because the Gospels are so dense and there's so much in them. And there's so many things that seem completely irrelevant unless you're asking the right kind of question. And that's one of them. So I'd love to know what Wes thinks about that, for example, and whether that at all influences his idea about motivations of the Gospels. That's a lot weaker than the obvious motivation in the Gnostic literature that he's talking about. But it's an interesting consideration, and I would love to know what he thinks, for example. And if that were a debate, that point that I've just made is nowhere near strong enough to make like an argument out of. To say, well, hold on a second, Wes, because here's some evidence of motivate. So I wouldn't use it. So it wouldn't get discussed. And people wouldn't know about it. But in a conversation, it's like, oh, hey, that reminds me of this, and let's talk about it. So it's so much more interesting for everyone as well,
That's why I like that idea rather than the more formal format. Because, people, there's people who aren't going to be moved or swayed by anything based on, it doesn't matter if you tell them that wall is white there, here's the scientific reason why, they're still going to say it's fucking black. But then there's a lot of people out there who, they just want to hear different ideas, and not one thing has to be 100% right or 100% wrong, and they want to try to get to the truth. It's like, I always talk about how I think one of the worst, curses that we've cast upon ourselves in humanity is making science and religion diametrically opposed to each other. They both seek the same answer. Why not work together?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's not what wins the clicks. But there are a lot of people who might think that way.
These days, I think maybe the trend is reversing. Like
I hope so.
If you hosted a debate that was like science versus religion, I don't think anyone clicks on it because it's like kind of a dead horse. Like it was really popular during the whole height of new atheism and stuff like that, but people kind of lost interest. It's boring. Now people are more interested. Like the stuff about Jesus claiming to be God, for example. I just did this debate on whether Jesus claimed to be God in the Gospels.
Who'd you debate?
David Wood, who's a Christian YouTuber. And I think it's a pretty popular topic, which is surprising because it's like a point of like scriptural exegesis. But that kind of stuff is more interesting to people now because Christianity is experiencing a sort of popular revival in the online space. It's becoming cool again, and people are getting really into the weeds with it. so now this kind of new atheist, like science versus religion, problem of evil, it's kind of boring. People don't really care about it. They want like the biblical stuff, which is really interesting. And so now,
Why do you think that happened?
because it's just been done. Like we've had the debates and the discussions, and like
No. Why do you think because I completely agree with you. There's been a phenomenon online that has spread to the real world where Christianity has become like very cool,
Yeah.
which that's fine. I'm just curious why you think that's happened.
there are, I mean, I'm not a sociologist, but there are some hypotheses. One is that Christianity is right all along, and people are beginning to realize it again. That's one explanation. Another explanation is to remember. You like that one, don't you?
Your mic wasn't on, but Alessi clicked.
Another explanation is that
He's such a good sport. I love this.
like you could think that, like, look, new atheism was cool. It was really cool, and it was a phenomenon. If you were alive, like in 2008, 2009, I mean, I was alive, but I was like 9 years old. But you know what I mean? Like you would have seen the intellectual space become dominated by atheism, and it's happened throughout history. It happens in the Victorian era.
Yes.
Kind of coinciding with Charles Darwin, and suddenly
Yes.
the intellectual elite, they're all atheists all of a sudden. And then you've got like religious revivals happening, and you get the growth of Mormonism out of revivals in America, and sort of goes back and forth. And like new atheism crops up, and it's really cool, and everyone's talking about it, and it's cool to be an atheist. And when you imagine a Christian, you imagine like your school teacher, sort of happy-go-lucky, and you've got the cool atheist in a leather jacket, like, well, actually, miss, you don't know about this, right? And okay, that's cool. But now, because people have gotten used to that and they begin to see through it, now when you think of an atheist, you think of the Reddit user with the fedora, and the Christian is the sort of like based Giga Chad. Like, you know what I mean? And so it's like a cultural shift. And
Yes.
and so why was new atheism so popular? Well, maybe because it was cottoning onto something, or maybe it was just a publishing fad. And we've got kind of a YouTube publishing fad right now, Christianity, but that's one hypothesis. Maybe it is actually just experiencing a growth, because it always seems to come back. But I think things just ebb and flow. I think
you're right.
Christianity is sort of coming up, and then suppose like Joe Rogan converts to Christianity, that'd be huge, become a big thing, and then 5 years down the line,
It won't be cool.
and Rogan's talking about Christianity again, and it's like the same stuff, and all of these arguments people right now find really interesting.
Yes.
Like, gosh, why did the disciples die for their beliefs, and all of this kind of, oh, that's so interesting. All of that is just like is water under the bridge, and suddenly the guy who comes in and goes, well, actually, I think that might be a mistranslation of the Greek. It's like, oh, hello, this is fun, And so new atheism before was all about the problem of evil and religion being evil. I don't think like Richard Dawkins or Christopher Hitchens know like a word of Greek. I mean, I don't know. But like all of these criticisms that we've been talking about, all of this interesting stuff. Well, did Jesus claim to be God? What about this translation? That stuff just kind of doesn't come up. There was a little bit about the virgin birth, actually, that Richard Dawkins likes to talk about. That's kind of interesting. But outside of that, like, no, it's like a different approach. And so if atheism becomes cool again, it's not going to be that new atheism style. It's going to be something else.
It'll be a new version
It's going to be scholarly. Because I think what people are interested in now is like the scholarly stuff, which for me is really exciting. I'm amazed that I've essentially become mostly interested in biblical scholarship. I used to be a philosopher, essentially, or like a wannabe philosopher. Analytic philosophy.
An Oxford philosopher.
Arguments, logical positivist, sort of arguments of the existence of God, premises, conclusions, syllogisms, all that kind of stuff. And I used to think that the rest was basically all like bunk. And now I just don't care about your stupid premises, man. I want to read the Bible. That's what I'm interested in. And it's amazing that that's happened. But I think that that's happening across the board, and people are interested in the text. And I'm constantly discovering things, especially in this debate about whether Jesus is claimed to be God or not. There are all, like, Christians often look at me like I've said that a square has three sides when I say Jesus didn't claim to be God, because it's like this obvious fact of the Gospels. In biblical scholarship for the past few hundred years, it's been mainstream just to say that Jesus didn't actually historically claim to be God. And that's like a later development into the doctrine.
Oh, they admit that.
Well, admit that is a strong term. Like, there are scholars who think that's the case. There are some scholars who think that's not the case. And a lot of biblical scholars are non-religious. So I think Morris Casey, for example, isn't a Christian, or wasn't a Christian when he wrote his, I forget what it's called. It's called like Jewish Prophet to Gentile God, I think, which is kind of a proto version of the most popular biblical scholar at the moment is probably Bart Ehrman, who you should have him on the show. I mean, he's fantastic.
Yeah, his name's come up.
He is phenomenal, man. He's great. But like a lot of Christians look at him and say, yeah, he's kind of cool, but he's actually not that great because I think he's made some blunders in the past and stuff like this as well. Like I remember when I was talking about this Wes Huff thing, my friends were pointing me to something that I wish I could remember it for fairness' sake, but something that like Bart had written that had a similar level of like just getting something wrong. I think it was about the telephone game actually. But anyway, like. Yeah, so those are your sort of scholars who are like, Jesus never claimed to be God. Bart Ehrman's book is How Jesus Became God, and it's about that kind of stuff. It's quite accessible. But Brant Pitre just wrote a book called Jesus and Divine Christology, which attempts to regain the idea that Jesus did make divine claims. But he opens the text, this is like last year, he opens the text by saying that most scholars think Jesus didn't claim to be God. And he describes this paradox. Most scholars think that Jesus didn't claim to be God, but most scholars think that very early on in Christianity, people started believing that he was God. So how do you explain this paradox? If he didn't claim to be God, why did they so immediately think he was God? And Brant Pitre's answer is to say, well, because he did actually claim to be God, and he gives all of his arguments why. And it's interesting, but I don't think Jesus claimed to be God. I think
You don't.
no, there are all kinds of arguments. That's why I say that Christians will look at me like I've lost my mind, but I think it's important to understand that in biblical scholarship, this is a very mainstream opinion. That's not an appeal to authority. I'm not saying it's therefore correct. I'm just saying it's not some like batshit, like wacky view. It's incredibly common. I think it might even be the most common view of scholars of Christology, but I don't know. So don't quote me on that. Don't even paraphrase me on that. But I find it absolutely fascinating. And Christians have their lines. They say, we've already discussed one. Jesus forgives sins in Mark chapter 2, and only God can forgive sins. But I've already given an explanation as to why I don't think that's him claiming to be God. And people say this just forgetting that in John chapter 20, Jesus gives the ability to forgive sins, the authority to forgive sins to his disciples. It's as if they just forget. Or they say, oh, well, that's because, they could only forgive sins, through Jesus. It's like, yeah, but what did Jesus say? As the Father has sent me, now I'm sending you. So if they're only doing it because Jesus gave him that authority, then Jesus is only doing it because God gave him that authority. It's like the same thing, right? Or they'll talk about how Jesus walked on the water. If Jesus walks on the water, you must have heard of that story.
Of course, yeah.
And he walks on the water, and in Job chapter 9, it's written that Job is speaking in it, and it's written that God alone treads upon the waves of the sea. Only God treads on the waves of the sea. And so people say, so that means
Jesus is God.
Jesus is, and it's calling back to this imagery. And again, they just kind of forget that Simon Peter then gets out of the boat and walks on water as well. And he starts sinking because he doesn't have enough faith. And Jesus sort of says like, oh, you haven't got enough faith. That's why you're sinking. But the implication is that if Simon Peter had enough faith, he would have stayed afloat. He'd be able to
do it.
And so how did he stay? Oh, well, okay, but he could only walk on water because, he had like faith in Jesus. Okay, but then maybe Jesus could only walk on water because he had faith in God. In other words, the stuff I was talking about with John the Baptist, all of the indications that Jesus gives of things that only God should be able to do, that he can do, forgiving sins, glorifying himself, raising the dead, judging people, all of this kind of stuff, are all things which at some point or another he then gives to his disciples as well. As if to say that, yes, I have this authority that's come from God, but it's something that's been administered to me. And in John chapter 17, Jesus prays for his disciples and all Christian believers, and prays that they'll all be one together. Can you pull up John 17? This is one of the most instructive parts of the New Testament. Also, actually, if you just want an interesting tidbit of mistranslation before we go there, can you type in John 12:44? Actually, just in a new tab, because I want to go to a slightly different website. John 12:44. I think is the verse. Yeah, check this out. So scroll down, go to Bible Hub. Scroll down, that one, Bible Hub. So this is John 12:44, right? So in the NIV, which is the most popular translation at the top there, then Jesus cried out, whoever believes in me does not believe in me only, but in the one who sent me. So he's basically saying that I've come from the Father. Like if you believe in me, you don't just believe in me, you believe in the Father too. Right. So he's sort of claiming to be God here, right? However, look underneath. Look at all of the other translations.
Jesus shouted to the crowds, if you trust me, you are trusting not only me, but also God who sent me.
Take a look at the English Standard Version.
And Jesus cried out and said, whoever believes in me believes not in me, but in him who sent me.
Do you notice a difference?
He's separating the two.
Do you notice a difference between the ESV there and the NIV? It's the word only.
Yeah.
So in one of them it says, whoever believes in me does not believe in me only, but in the one who sent me. In others, it just says, whoever believes in me does not believe in me, but believes in the one who sent me. Now, here's a question for you. But all of these have been translated from the same Greek manuscripts. Which one do you think the Greek aligns with? Do you think the word only is in the Greek? The answer is no, it's not. So how did it end up in the English? Because of translation philosophies. There are literalist translations.
Translation philosophies.
Yeah, because there are different ways to translate a phrase. Are you trying to translate the words, like word for word, or are you trying to translate the phrase? So, for example, in the Old Testament, there's a verse about slavery where God says, it says of slaves, he says, they are their silver, I think he says. Like, that slave is your silver. Now, what that means is that the slave is your money, because silver is like a euphemism for money. Now, as a translator into English, you've got to look at the Hebrew and decide, are you going to translate it word for word and say the slave is his silver? Or are you going to translate the idea for an English reader and say the slave is his property?
Yeah.
So depending on what you're going for, it's going to do a different thing. So the NIV, the most popular translation of the Bible, is a so-called like phrase-for-phrase translation. So it tries to get at what the Bible means. Whereas if you read something like the NRSV, which is my favorite version, the New Revised Standard Edition, the New Revised Standard Version, updated edition, so NRSV UE, this is an attempt to accurately translate the Greek terms, which I find most helpful because that's what I'm interested in. But if you're just trying to read for the stories, you might prefer the NIV. But you've got to realize when you're reading an English translation that you are reading through the lens of an interpreter.
Yes.
So in this instance, this is the most obvious case. Bear in mind that I'm debating whether Jesus claimed to be God. If you read the ESV there, and imagine I'm up and I'm at the podium and I'm doing my debate, and I say Jesus didn't claim to be God because look, he said, whoever believes in me does not believe in me, but believes in the one who sent me. So he's separating himself from God. But now imagine my opponent gets up. He's saying Jesus did claim to be God, and he just quotes the other translations of Jesus claimed to be God because he says, whoever believes in me doesn't just believe in me, but believes in the one who sent me. So I must have this connection. So that translation, that one word, is crucial to understanding the nature of Jesus and what he was claiming to be. And that is an interesting example of how I think they've taken too much. But you can understand the NIV translators, they've already assumed that Jesus did claim to be God. So when they come across the Greek, they're like, well, what did Jesus mean here? What idea was he trying to get across, and how can we convey that to an English reader? And when he said that they don't believe in me, but the one who sent me, what he means is like they don't just believe in me. So they translated it that way. But if you've got a different interpretation, that's not how it reads. So if you are ever reading the Bible and either something jumps out at you, you think it's important or interesting, or definitely if it's confusing, the first thing that you should always do, look on Bible Hub, scroll up to the top here. See where it says Greek up a bit?
Yep, right here.
Yeah, that should... No, up a bit. Sorry, yeah, just click on that. Anytime what you have is a breakdown of the original Greek text next to the words that's been translated. So if you scroll down a tiny little bit, whoever believing... the one believing in me not believes in me, but in the one who sent me.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.